So thank you for continuing to tune in.
Yes.
Talking through mastering the medical school interview now. So the aims and objectives, what we're going to be talking about in this little section is about going through your interview technique and understanding the structure and different styles of interview, and also how we can gain confidence with the MMIs style of interview prep. And we're going to talk about some different styles of question and develop that structured approach to your interview preparation, as well as learning to handle the more difficult, some of the discriminator style of questions. Now, of course, COVID has thrown a few spanners in the works of how interviews tend to work, and there's now some online interviews. So medical schools will still be able to run MMI interview circuits online, albeit virtual. So COVID hasn't removed the interview from being a crucial part of the application. Remember, of course, that the content remains the same, and you still need to prepare for the same topic as per the in-person interviews. Now, the format and experience is different to your in-person interviews, so it is essential that you prepare specifically how to approach online interviews. So when we look at our online interviews, it's important to take into account a few different things. Think about your location and your setup. Choose your quiet, clean, well-lit room. Think about your body language and your speech. Maintain eye contact to the camera, looking at the webcam rather than your screen. And you may need to speak slightly slower than you would in person, because obviously there's going to be difficulties hearing. Dress code. To be less alarming on the interview day, try to avoid stripes or bright colors. So using plain, neutral, and dark colors are important as well. Make sure you test all your technical equipment in advance. You don't want to have a Wi-Fi cutout or your laptop run out of battery during an interview, and try to prevent interruptions. So close tabs, lock doors, make sure that you have a do not disturb sign on your door so that your family don't come rushing in, for instance. Okay, so let's go through some interview technique. Firstly, why do medical schools interview? Well, it's a communication exercise. Medicine is a profession that relies heavily on communication, and they're all about testing your commitment and interest. Okay, the interviewer is also going to be interested to see whether you have a realistic insight into what a career in medicine involves, and it's all about evaluating your suitability for a career in medicine. They may also like to validate your personal statement. So way back at the beginning of today's session, I did mention that the universities will use your personal statement as a springboard going into interview. So there's a few different styles of interview. You have panel interviews, multiple mini interviews, they're MMIs, and also Oxbridge interviews, which are subtly different. So we're going to be talking through those different styles today. So again, we've seen this slide already, talking through the different types of interviews that are offered across the UK, the different medical schools. So a panel interview, again, normally 15 to 30 minutes long, with 2 to 5 panel members asking you questions, and they could be admissions tutors, doctors, university staff, medical students, lay members of the public, etc. The MMI, meanwhile, again, we've seen the slide already today, typically 5 to 10 stations, 3 to 10 minutes per station, with focused shorter interviews, combining traditional questions and your MMI specific skills. Some examples of multiple mini interviews specific skills are communication skills, professional judgment, empathy, problem solving, data interpretation and numeracy, comprehension, as well as video stations. And video stations is what I alluded to before, where they may show you what a consultation between a doctor and a patient might look like, and you may need to critique what the doctor did well, so assessing your professional judgment, as well as your communication skills within that sort of video station scenario. MMI circuits are quite similar to going speed dating, because you're going through moving between these stations, building rapport and meeting interviewers as you go around. And if your interview is online, which is more than likely, then these will be a series of online breakout rooms. So it's still following a similar scenario rather than you physically walking around. You can see you may go from a station on problem solving to a station asking about your work experience, a station that's assessing your motivation for medicine, why medicine. You may have a scenario all about breaking bad news before you go to a professional judgment station. You could start at station 5, move to station 1. Essentially, you're working in that sort of logical sequence. So a typical MMI station will first of all get you to read instructions, and that will take about 1 to 2 minutes standing outside the room. And this is where you start to think about what skills they're looking for, and you can start assessing how you can display these skills. So you've got a minute kind of mental preparation time. You'll then go into the station and be asked to complete the task, and this typically takes between 3 to 10 minutes. And there will be in the task with you, there'll be an examiner with a feedback form. So they'll be writing some notes and starting to grade you as they would in a panel interview as well. Now, the people in the station may also include actors, particularly in a situation where you may be asked to showcase communication skills. That could be with an actor. You may also be asked to use props and sort of data packages, etc. And then at the end, there'll be a bell that rings and you move to the next station or move to the next breakout room. So some top MMI tips. So that golden minute of preparation that you get at the beginning, it's important to use that as wisely as possible. So think about what skills could be tested in that scenario, and then plan how you will demonstrate those required skills. So hopefully by the time you come to your interview, you will have done a bit of preparation and you'll have a rough idea of the different types of stations that can come up, and you can start to draw associations versus what you're about to go into. Look out for any props and see how you can use them. If there's a communication station and you get a pen, use the pen, draw a diagram. As soon as you finish one station, it's important to just forget about it. Focus on the next one. It's important not to bring any concerns that you may have from one of your answer in one station onto the next one. Make sure you're versatile and energetic. You're constantly making a new first impression. And that's the other great thing about MMI. If one of them goes poorly, it doesn't throw the whole interview. A panel interview, you get one shot. Multiple mini interviews, you get lots of different shots. Oxbridge interviews. So the reason that I've separated this out a little bit is because Oxbridge, although they're similar to panel interviews, those interviewing you are more scientific minded and clinical minded. They're going to be asking you more lateral thinking questions to try and mimic a tutorial. So they're looking to see how you see both sides of an argument, think on your feet, explain your views to others, and present information and cope with pressure. So we're going to first talk about a little bit about what an interview may assess in terms of your motivation for medicine. So there's a difference between them asking opened and closed questions. So open questions, you should identify require longer answers with multiple considerations. And this is where they facilitate a large number of possible answers from you. You can explore complex issues and subjectivity. So for instance, why medicine is quite an open question. Okay, and there's lots of different things that you can bring into that answer. Equally, in an open question, the interviewee will begin to control the conversation, and that's you. A closed question is normally where they're expecting a one-word or sentence answer. These are going to be quick, easy to analyze answers. They can be focused, okay, and then with the interviewer controlling the conversation. So it's important to take into account what type of question you're being asked. Now, in your motivation for medicine, you may be asked, tell me something about yourself. Why do you want to be a doctor? Do you think you'll make a good doctor? What do you look forward to least about being a doctor? Have you read anything medically related? These are all motivation type questions. And this is where you can start to illustrate and talk about your additional reading. So I would suggest in preparation for the interview, try to read at least one medically related publication regularly. That could be the Student BMJ, the British Medical Journal, the New Scientist, newspapers, or the BBC website. As I said, if you're applying to med school in the UK, you need to understand what's happening in terms of healthcare news in the UK. So understanding what the key issues in the NHS are, understanding what are the key themes around the UK, super important. The BBC is a great resource to do that. It might be good as well to prepare an article that you've read recently that's interesting and relevant. So they may ask, tell me about an article you've read recently, tell me about something you've read recently. That may even be a book. For example, Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt is a fantastic book. Other ones by Atul Gawande is fantastic as well. And Paul Kalanithi's When Breath Becomes Air, there's Henry Marsh's Do No Harm, all really common books that students read in advance of an interview. They give a great insight into the career. So some additional motivation questions I've shown up on screen here. How have you shown your commitment to medicine? How will you deal with death? What challenges do you think you will face as a future doctor? As well as even talking through your personal statement, where you will have already started to identify some of your motivations to become a doctor. So just to summarize that little subsection, to prepare for the motivation style questions, it's important to reread your personal statement before the interview, understand your own personal reasons for wanting to study medicine. It's an individual choice for an individual career. Dedicate some regular time to exploring medicine as a career, but also think about the challenges to medicine. It's not always easy. You're working long shifts. You have to deal with death. People are sick around you. It's a long time to study. So it's not all roses in a career in medicine, but it is still a great career path. You may also like to have talked to doctors and medical students to help gain further insight. So another key bit that they may ask a lot about in the interviews is work experience. And this is how you can gain an insight into medicine. Speaking to medical students and doctors, attending lectures and events, reading around medicine, watching some documentaries, any volunteering or charity work, any work experience you've been on as well. So the purpose of work experience is to confirm your desire to become a doctor. It's all about gaining that realistic insight into the medical profession, evaluating your suitability, seeing based on what the doctors do, is this something that I'd be comfortable doing as well? And also how you develop certain skills. So you then need to reflect on this as well, and reflecting on how this made you feel and what you've learned before you think about what skills and attributes you saw. And then also consider, has this experience, your work experience, shadowing a doctor, being volunteering, etc., has it strengthened your desire to study medicine? And that's all about the reflection. And this all boils down to reflect, reflect, reflect. Think also, what are the challenges you saw about a career in medicine? Has this put you off? So what you need to show to your interviewer is that you have a balanced view of what the career involved, and you have a practical assessment of what it would mean to work as a doctor. It's all about that reflection. So for the work experience questions, make sure that you keep a log when you are doing your work experience. So write down any interesting cases that stood out, and you may like to do some extra reading around them. So for instance, I was actually very fortunate in my work experience to actually see the beginnings of a gender reassignment procedure. So I did some reading around the medical procedures of that, which is an interesting springboard in interview. You may like as well to list the challenges you saw and how you will overcome them. Think about times you saw key attributes and skills in action. How can you reflect on what the great teamwork skills, what the great communication skills, how well doctors empathize with their patients? Can you reflect on those and then think how you could also show the same skills? Consider how your other experiences can demonstrate insight. It doesn't just have to be clinical work experience. It could be volunteering, for instance. And then also think about this multidisciplinary team in action. There's loads of people working in a hospital who will turn the cogs to make sure that the place functions as best possible for its patients. Now, another key area of medical interview questions is about teamwork and leadership. So some typical questions they could ask here is, what do you understand by the term multidisciplinary teams? You could be asked to talk more about the role of some allied healthcare professionals. You could be asked, what can make a team fail? You could be asked to talk about a time when you experienced conflict in a team. You could be asked to give an example of when you have been a leader, for instance. And teamwork and leadership, well, leadership in particular here, you can think about what some of the key qualities are of a leader. And then you may like to reflect on these questions and talk about how you can already show some of these aspects of what a great leader does. Because ultimately, a doctor is a leader. They're a leader to the other doctors around them. They're a leader for their patients, and they're a leader to the other allied healthcare professionals working in a hospital as well. So remember, whenever you're relating back to your personal experiences at the Medic Portal, and I recommend to my students as well to follow this STAR answer format. So give the interviewer the situation, what was going on, what was the task you had to do, what was your action, what was your result, and then importantly, how did you reflect on that scenario so you could be a better team worker, a better leader next time? And think about some buzzwords. So a leader should be someone that's inspiring. A leader should be someone who listens and communicates clearly. They should be able to delegate appropriately. They should be approachable. They should be creative and adaptable, and they should thrive under pressure. So think clearly to yourself, how can I start to show these key characteristics of a leader in response to these questions from the examiners? So again, some top tips: prepare a strong example of a time where you've led a team. Have a unique example of where you've been involved in teamwork. It's got to be something personal. You know, you could be part of a drama group, in an orchestra, playing in a team sport. And you may like to link team working to that multidisciplinary team, the MDT you've seen on your work experience. And you could say, you know what, I saw that orthopedics team, how they all sat around and had a look at that x-ray together and then decided a course of action for the patient. And you know what, although it's not a medical scenario, this is something I've really done a little bit with a project that I was a part of. I was working as part of a team, for instance. Think about when teams may fail and why. And then the examiner may ask, if you were the leader of a team, how would you prevent a team failing, for instance? It's also important to prepare an example of when you've been involved in conflict. So what are your conflict resolution skills like? That could come up in an interview. So reaching the end here, they may also ask about your moral and professional reasoning. So in interviews, this can feature in ethical scenarios, in other words, the classic "what would you do" question, or some communication skills, empathy, And this is going to be assessed through some direct questions. So that could be in the panel or the MMI. You may have situational judgment style ranking. They may give you, they may talk about a scenario. You may have to be asked to rank certain responses to the scenario. There could be a role play that you need to be part of with an actor, with an examiner observing your interactions. There could be some group interviews at different universities, as well as a video station. We've talked about what the video station may involve already. So when we approach our ethical questions, it's important to take a second to think about the dilemma before we answer it. Consider the arguments for, the arguments against, and then come to our balanced conclusion. It's also important to never rush in and give an answer without your supporting evidence. Remember that whatever you say, you need to be able to back up and you need to have thought critically about the scenario. When it comes to an ethical question, there's no correct answer. So what that means is that the examiner can ask constant follow-up questions and essentially play a little bit of devil's advocate with you. Remember, there's no incorrect approach, so just make sure that your logic is well-reasoned and based on ethical principles. So some key ethical themes that often come up at interview include organ donation, resource allocation, alcohol and illicit drug use, as well as some self-inflicted conditions. So for instance, lung cancer stemming as a result of chronic smoking. Whenever you're dealing with an ethical scenario at interview, consider your arguments for, against, and how we can come to a balanced conclusion. So here are some sample ethics questions. So what do you know about the opt-out system in Wales for organ donation? What are your opinions? The UK has recently changed to England has recently changed to an opt-out system as well. So that would be part of being abreast of current affairs. Talking about blood transfusions, ethical issues surrounding this. Is it ever appropriate to break confidentiality? Social media scenarios come up a lot. So how do we protect our patients' privacy and confidentiality in social media? Really important to consider and think about on the spot as well. Now, overarching all of these interview themes comes professionalism. So it's important that you read and familiarize yourself with the GMC's good medical practice and the duties of a doctor. Always act within your remit. Remember that patient safety comes first, and of course, seek help where required. Now, the General Medical Council releases this publication, Good Medical Practice. I'd strongly recommend reading it. Not only does it help prepare for the SJT of the UCAT, but you can also use the sentiments from there as a springboard for consideration in your interview. So that document is written by the General Medical Council, and what they are, they're kind of the regulating body for doctors in the UK, setting those standards, ensuring those standards are met, overseeing medical education, and taking action when there's a risk to their patients. So some top tips for the moral and professional reasoning. We're about 5 minutes away from finishing. Use those 4 pillars of beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and in any ethical question, always consider both sides of the argument. Revise common topics such as organ donation and euthanasia. Remember to understand what constitutes professionalism and how to display, and know about the NHS Constitution. So that can be found online. So use the principles of the NHS and its core values to link back and talk more about these interview scenarios. Okay. A final point they could mention is problem solving as well. So you may have MMI stations that integrate problem solving as part of the stations. So inside the station, you may be given a list of people with different professions and think, which 3 would you choose to have with you if you were marooned on a desert island? A problem solving station, there's no correct answer, but what you'll be asked is you'll be asked to reason and explain your choices. So when you approach these problem solving questions, it's important to remain calm, talk through your answer reasonably, start with the facts, then build up to reach a conclusion for the examiner so they can follow your train of thought. Don't worry too much about getting the answer right or wrong. What they're looking is how you think and what your problem solving skills are like, how you approach these questions. So this is all about your inquisitive abilities. So to wrap up, we'll just talk a little bit about Oxbridge style questions on their own here. So they may ask you a little bit more lateral thinking problem solving questions. How much does Mount Everest weigh? Why do tribes who hunt with poison tipped darts not die when they eat meat? Okay, and you can see some of these questions flashing up on the screen here, a little bit more lateral thinking, stuff that you wouldn't have encountered before, and they're throwing you in unfamiliar scenarios and seeing how you respond. That's technically what the Oxbridge interviews will try and do. So when you're approaching a problem-solving question, remain calm and composed. They're purposely throwing these unfamiliar scenarios at you. They also present an opportunity for you to demonstrate working under pressure. It's important to be resilient, but not dismissive. So try to work with the examiner and show your ability to work in a tutorial environment if this is pertaining to Oxbridge. And always think we need to be logical, objective. How would a scientist approach these scenarios? And of course, the final question they may ask you, is there anything you wish to ask the medical school? Okay, so you may have some questions for the medical school at the end of your interview, and that is a great opportunity to show that you've looked at their website and you've read a bit about what it might mean to study at a particular institution, okay, and they would be interested in you already having taken the initiative to look and see what they have to offer. Okay, and are there any questions for me? That is the end of my sessions today. Thank you so much for tuning in. More than happy to take a couple of questions. I apologize for running slightly over, but I think there's a lot of important stuff to cover. So I hope that everyone found it useful today.
First of all, thank you so much, Alessio. It was a pleasure listening to you. Thank you for the presentation and for sharing so much information with us. I'm sure all the students and the parents and the educators who joined us today gained tremendously from this session. In the interest of time, I think we would be going forward with the next session, but I would request you to stay back and use the Q&A feature and type in some of these answers so that the students who have some questions, they could just get responses from you directly. And with that, I would also request you to just enter the email ID that you would want us to write emails to. If you would want, where should the students send their additional questions? If you could also,
I think the best plan there, Devesh, would be for the students to contact the Medic portal directly with any questions that stem from these initially. If they would like to arrange any tutoring with us, attend any courses, contact the Medic portal directly. There's contact links on our website as well. I think that would be the best course of action. I'm happy to hang around and type some messages into the chat for the next 10 minutes or so, but I hope that everyone enjoys the rest of today.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Thank you, Alessio. It was a pleasure having you on this session today.
Cheers.